What Mercedes wants, Mercedes gets, as FIA have confirmed that there will be technical directive all the teams on the grid must follow with the intention of reducing porpoising in the interests of the driver's safety. So what are these directives, and how will they impact the teams on the grid, specifically Mercedes, who have spearheaded this campaign against porpoising? Stick around to find out, but before we get going, consider subscribing if you didn't think the FIA would take measures against the porpoising. Now let's get to it. As I discussed in the previous video, a good amount of drivers believe that the porpoising and its effects have become safety and health hazards for the drivers to try and muscle through the phenomena with their worst experience at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix this weekend. After the race, drivers would collectively bring this to the FIA's attention, who to their credit did not shove the concern by the wayside and actually have decided to take specific actions to protect the drivers. These measures have been introduced to help protect the immediate physical impact on the health of the drivers, a number of whom have reported back pain following recent events. Acting on the ever-increasing calls to help the drivers escape the worst effects while racing, in the FIA's words, the official statement from the FIA reads, "A technical directive has been issued to give guidance to the teams about the measures the FIA intends to take to tackle the problem. These include 1. Closer scrutiny of the planks and skids, both in terms of their design and the observed wear. 2. The definition of a metric based on the car's vertical acceleration that will give a quantitative limit for acceptable levels of vertical oscillations. The exact mathematical formula for this metric is still being analysed by the FIA, and the Formula One teams have been invited to contribute to this process. In addition to these short-term measures, the FIA will convene a technical meeting with the teams in order to define measures that will reduce the propensity of cars to exhibit such phenomena in the medium term." The FIA statement added, "In a sport where the competitors are routinely driving at speeds in excess of 300 km per hour, it is considered that all of a driver's concentration needs to be focused on that task, and that excessive fatigue or pain experienced by a driver could have significant consequences should it result in a loss of concentration." Now, what does this mean for Mercedes, who undoubtedly need every help that they can get? While Christian Horner feared that if and when the FIA stepped in to impose a regulation, it would work too much in Mercedes' favour, thus losing them their advantage. But to the FIA's credit, they were very fair in the regulations that they came up with, where most experts believe that the new regulations will do Mercedes more bad than good. First, the bad. In the FIA's technical derivative, the FIA will be looking to limit the number of vertical oscillations, aka bouncing, aka porpoising, or the number of times the car bounces during a lap, or at a particular part of the track. This derivative would let teams like Red Bull, who have little to no porpoising problems, to compete as they have been doing so, whereas teams who suffer an egregious amount of porpoising will be forced to meet the standards that the FIA will be setting. Given that Mercedes is undoubtedly at the top of the standings when it comes to who suffers from the most porpoising, this means that it is very likely that the team will have to raise its ride height to meet the standard that FIA wants. While this may not help the team improve their race pace, Hamilton and George Russell undoubtedly don't have to visit a chiropractor after each race. While this may suck for the team in the short term, these derivatives is the start of the conversation to put in place specified and better solutions for seasons to come. Russell's complaints this past weekend at Baku were aimed more towards F1 on whether or not they want to see porpoising remain an issue over the next few years, and the FIA has made it clear that efforts will be made to help the teams find a way to eradicate this issue. FIA's goal is to someday move beyond the need for a maximum limit of bouncing or porpoising and instead offer tweaks that the team may make to their design that will fully eradicate the issue. Many analysts and experts have suggested that this could be done through more freedom of suspension technology, even a return of F1 to active suspension, or even making mass dampers legal again. It is this lack of freedom of suspension technology that many believe is the key factor as to why Mercedes has been struggling to gain control over their W13. And as for the top two teams on the grid, namely Ferrari and Red Bull, These two teams may see their advantage over the other teams increase this weekend given what the FIA intend to do from Montreal all the way down to the last race of the season. But with that in mind, Mercedes have now come out to say that they believe that they are past their porpoising problems and that it's actually not responsible for the main chunk of their time loss. In Toto Wolff's words, "I think porpoising in itself is maybe not the key thing. It's just that the car feels rigid. That kind of overshadows everything," he said. "We are talking about setup directions that are influenced by the bouncing rather than say, okay, we are not having that now. Let's look at how we can make the car faster." But then again, Toto and his words don't match, as experts believe that Mercedes have also been developing the car as much as they can to make sure that the car is properly positioned to capitalize on things when it finally cures either the porpoising or the rigidity of the W13, as Toto would say. That is why at first glance at the team's configuration of the W13 at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, you would immediately notice a new stay protruding from its mirror solution, which may seem a tiny detail, but is evidence and a look into Mercedes' development mindset. The new stay appeared for the first time below the side impact structure, much like the team's use of the segmented stay arrangement on the upper surface of the SIS, which was also controversial when rival teams caught a glimpse of them. The new surface is redundant when used as an additional support, so experts believe that its intent is entirely aerodynamic. The change may be minuscule in the grand scheme of things, but again, this shows that the team is looking at the W13 from every angle, and not just the porpoising. Trackside Engineering Director Andrew Shovlin would be asked about this update, to which he would reply with, "It is a very, very small change. But when you have a car that's difficult to work with and not quick enough, you don't want to hold all your bread and butter development work in the tunnel, because that's just time lost. If you stop for a month, you'll be the equivalent to that behind in terms of development by the end of the year." So one of the challenges that we're facing now, which is really new to us in the last few years, is you're trying to solve some major problems, fundamental issues with the bouncing or the ride of the car, at the same time as making sure that you can keep putting performance on. "We are trying to avoid doing things that might confuse the picture," he added, "but then equally, we look at the parts and we think, well, we can just put that on and we know that the effect will be a very small step in the right direction. Those kinds of bits are insignificant, but typical of the kinds of things we've got to keep doing to make sure that we're not stood still." This season may be the hardest for Mercedes ever since the dawn of the hybrid era, where they dominated over the competition almost every year. But former Red Bull driver Mark Webber believes that it is still a mistake for teams to underestimate and write Mercedes off this season, saying, "They've come off the back of an incredible run, world championship after world championship. Now they are struggling even to get podiums at this point." Obviously, it's a big shift in their winning mentality mindset. It's not happening for them. The car is clearly not performing under these new regulations, so they've got a mountain to climb. But you never underestimate them. They can fight back at any point. Mercedes definitely have a mountain to climb, and the likes of Mount Everest at that, to climb back into title contention. But what do you think? Will these new regulations from the FIA backfire for Mercedes, or will it surprisingly work in their favour? Let us know in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.